recording, and then so I'll just work through the presentation, and then if anyone has any questions, they'll be able to raise their hands. Is that right?
Yes. So remind everybody that there's a raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. Just hit that whenever you want to ask a question, and I'll jump in and let Jen know, and then we'll enable you to unmute yourself, and we'll go from there.
Okay. What Tony said, y'all. I'm glad I'm a meeting. All right, thanks, Tony. I appreciate it. So we can go off the recording now.
Okay, yeah, we're recording. We're good to go.
All right, thanks. Hey everyone, this is thank you for attending today. This is Jen Gates. For those who may not have worked with us before, this is our CDBG pre-application workshop. That little different format. Usually we're in person and able to see each other's smiling, happy faces, but unfortunately that's not the case today. But hope everyone is safe and well, and that we're able to work through this virtual format together. So what we're going to do today is this is primarily just going to be an overview of the program and etc. And then we will have some time for some questions and answers at the end of it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you're able to see the presentation as we work through it, or I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Tony, can I share my screen? If so, how do I do that?
Yeah, move your mouse, and at the bottom there should be a green button that says share screen.
That's what I thought. I'm not seeing it. I see leave. Yeah. I can't leave.
Jen.
Yeah. Hi, Paul.
Hi, I just got a text from Mario. He said he's not able to log on, and he tried calling in and couldn't get in.
Okay. I'll resend him the link then.
Okay.
See if that works. So in that case, or Paula, do you have that information? Could you send that on to him, please?
I don't have, all I have is what was sent to me.
Oh, it's in the agenda. Tony, would you be able to send that to Mario?
Yeah, I don't know if I have his email address.
I'm gonna forward that real quick.
Yep. If you forward it to me, I'll get him the link real quick.
Okay. I promise we'll get this sorted out, y'all.
I sent him a text telling him that you were resending.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. And I still don't see that it's share screen thing, which means I'm doing something.
So you're in your main Zoom window, and if you move your mouse, it should be a bright green button.
Oh yeah, the one that says share screen. Got it. Okay.
You can choose to share just an application or your whole desktop.
Okay, just gonna be the application. All right, y'all. I'm so sorry about this. Okay, so think we're getting it sorted out. This is going to be the presentation portion of it. Go ahead and share this with y'all. And so that was just our soft start to the application or workshop. Sorry about that. So as I mentioned, this is the CDBG pre-application workshop for program year 2021. And very much appreciate everyone's attendance. We definitely want to welcome you to the workshop. Our CDBG program support staff, hopefully you've had the opportunity to meet us and we've had the opportunity to meet you before. But if not, I'm Jennifer Gates, and the city's grants coordinator. And we also have Paula Harper, who is our very experienced CDBG consultant. And we also have Tony from IT as our hero in the background, managing everything. So thank you, Tony. Yes. Just as a brief overview, again, we are just going to discuss the program, the application process, a few post-award contract requirements, and then we will have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of it. I do ask that if we can try to keep it specific to, or as specific as possible to the program, and to maybe any application clarifications that you might have. Anything that might be program specific, or project specific, we usually talk about that just kind of offline after a standard meeting regardless. And so it would, as much as I would love to have that in the public forum, it just in the interest of time and ease for everyone, it would be great if we could have those specific conversations offline, but just as an overview. So in the meantime, while I briefly discuss CDBG, what we would typically do is have the copies of the applications available to y'all. We have online, I have the application for PY20 that you are more than welcome to review as we go along. I had to make some last minute edits to the PY21. So that's unfortunately not available right this moment, but will be within the hour after we wrap up this meeting. And so if you would like the web address for the where you can find that application, it's nbtexas.org. And then, well, actually, if you go to the city's website and the finance department, and then there is a little tab over on the, or a hyperlink over on the left that says Community Development CDBG Program. And if you click on that link and scroll to the bottom of that, that actually has the program year 2020 application and the presentation from last year, but this is the presentation for PY21 that we're currently going over. So if you would like, you're welcome to glance through the application as we go along. And but please know that we're available for any questions if you're not able to access that at this time. So just as an overview, CDBG is the Community Development Block Grant established in 1974. And I believe we've been getting it since about 1994. And so it's a federal program that is non-competitive grants. Hi, Kathleen. And those are for cities, counties, and states. And so it's a formula-based allocation. They look at several different factors, and HUD just tells us how much that we are going to be receiving. The purpose of the grant is to reduce poverty and its effects, develop viable communities by providing decent housing, creating a suitable living environment, or expanding economic opportunities. Part of a very important part of this program is that HUD has what they call national objectives. And so all programs for this CDBG absolutely must benefit low to moderate income persons or households, aid in the prevention of slight, eliminate prevention or elimination of slum and blight, or meet an urgent need. We don't use that very often because that's just something that there are other programs that support that, but it is something that is covered under CDBG. For the funding and the caps, HUD doesn't typically release the actual dollar amounts until a little bit later on in the year. So when you receive the application, it will have information saying what our program year 2020 grant information is. And it's been very close as far as it's been very consistent from year to year. So we would expect that it would be approximately, $413,000. Based on that, there are certain allocations that HUD allows, but then they have caps within those different categories. So for example, the public service category for the CDBG funding has a 15% cap, which would be approximately $62,000. And then if it's going to be for public services, it either has to be a completely new service or it has to be a measurable increase. Obviously, right now, we're all experiencing an increase in demand. So we wouldn't expect that that would probably be too much of an issue for people. As a brief side note, for anyone who has participated in the coronavirus program for CDBG funding, this is something that's different because there's no funding caps on the CDBG CV, but there is a cap, unfortunately, still for the standard CDBG program. So that's just a very important aspect to be aware of because it's always a very competitive part of it. HUD has an allowance of up to 20% for the administration of the program. And so that's only available to the city, and that's used for things like consultants and for advertising, et cetera, just kind of what it takes to run the program. And so that if that full 20% was utilized, that would be almost 83,000. And then other activities is considered public facilities, public housing. We'll talk about that more later on, but that's approximately 65%, and that would be about 269,000 if that's based on the current year's allocation. So as far as the definitions, someone that is a low to moderate income, you'll hear us refer to this quite a bit. The residents whose household income is equal to or less than 80% of the area's household median income. HUD determines what these income levels are, and then they communicate those to everyone nationwide. And so we have information about that, detailed information available on the website, and then we also have it within the application at this point, which we'll get to in just a moment. CDBG target areas, those are primarily low to moderate income areas. So census block groups where usually it would be about half, but we do have a slight adjustment for our community, and that's 48.92% of households are low to moderate income in that area of the city. And then presumed benefit or limited clientele, those are individuals who are presumed by HUD to be low to moderate income based on their situation. So for example, CASA with supporting children, senior citizens, they are considered to be limited clientele and presumed benefit. And just a little bit more detail, as I mentioned, those would be individuals who are maybe severely disabled, elderly, which is a very young 62 years of age. Not entirely sure where 62 came from, but it's HUD standard as of right now. Victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, abused or neglected children, people experiencing homelessness, illiterate adults, migrant workers, persons living with AIDS, such as that. You'll hear us refer to clients often as beneficiaries, and obviously those are individuals who are benefiting from, or households who are benefiting from the program. And so the most common objective for public services to support low and mod income persons. Sorry, I'm seeing emails pop up as I'm going along, just making sure y'all are able to get in. So at least 51% of the program beneficiaries have to be low to moderate income people for the public services portion. That's also the case for public facilities, which would include infrastructure improvements. And so that has to benefit at least 51% low to moderate income persons. For housing activities, those have to serve 100% low and moderate income clients. And we'll have examples of those within the presentation. So as mentioned, the income limits at this point are based on 2020. They were effective as of April 1st of last year. And so the annual household income that you hopefully see on your screen, for one person, that's a maximum of about $40,000, up to eight people and more. It's a maximum of $75,000 for people who would be able to receive services. And so we would expect that usually HUD gets these released well before the actual contract kicks off. Things are a little strange right now with 2020, but we would expect that at a minimum, you'll know by the time that the contract starts on October 1st. Eligible applicants for the CDBG program, that can be an existing 501c3, or if you have another nonprofit status, public agencies. If you're a for-profit, as long as your mission is to serve low-income persons or families, city departments are eligible. That is not something that we maybe expect to use this year, just because obviously there's a great need. But we'll see how many, how the applications kind of roll out. It could also be for community-based housing organizations or development organizations. It's important to mention that if you are, for any applicant that's on the federal or state debarred list, you're not eligible to apply for or receive CDBG funds. So that is something that we have to check. Don't expect it to be a problem, but we do like to go ahead and mention that just to be on the safe side. For some examples about public services, obviously we've got a great variety of nonprofits that serve our residents with services such as Meals on Wheels programs at senior centers, youth services that include after school or counseling, children's services, services for abused or neglected children, healthcare, including some medical and mental health care. That could be especially important this year. And then homeless services, and also homelessness prevention, educational job training, transportation assistance, food assistance. So as you can see, with such a broad type of services that can be provided, this is why it's always a very competitive portion of our applications. It's incredibly important to mention that salaries are approved, but it can only be for staff who are directly involved in program delivery. So those are going to be your counselors that are providing those services, or client intake, things like that. It cannot be used for administrative costs. So when that's sometimes a clarifying question that we have when we're reviewing applications that we've received. But it is important to know program delivery is encouraged, it's allowable, it's encouraged, but administrative costs are not. Housing activities examples that, as I mentioned, they must also benefit low to moderate income households. Typically, these are going to be minor owner-occupied home repair. The home repair projects and accessibility modifications, there's a cap of $10,000 per project for those. So that's why I felt like it was important to mention that. Energy efficiency improvements, and then also home buyer assistance. So those are housing types of examples, which would be different from public facilities, which would be, so housing activity is specific to someone's, obviously their specific home, but a public facility could be something like a shelter type of scenario. Somewhere is going to have its public access rather than it just being someone's home. So that's an important notice or important difference between the two different area-based activities. That could be the repair, installation of infrastructure. So if you have streets, sidewalks, etc. The acquisition, construction, or rehabilitation of public facilities. So as I mentioned, facilities for people with special needs, shelters, the development or improvements to public parks, historic preservation, don't expect to use probably any of that this year. And then, just a few code enforcement types of things are eligible. And so if you had an activity where you needed to demolish a house or something as part of that, then that activity could be supported. But it's definitely best to have the conversation with us just to make sure before moving forward. Ineligible activities, something that is strictly ineligible, those are going to be buildings, anything when the building is used for the general conduct of government. So, for City Hall, you're not going to see me out there repairing sidewalks. General government expenses or political activities. There are some where it's generally ineligible, but there are some exceptions. So typically you're not allowed to purchase equipment, but if it's part of a public services grant or housing, if you're having to build, if you're doing, housing repairs and you're needing tools to support only that program, that would be an allowable exception to it. Operating and maintenance expenses might be eligible if they're part of a public services grant, construction of new permanent residential structures, and then direct income payments. So a direct income payment would be if someone were to come to you and say, I need rental assistance, and if you were going to pay that person directly, that type of thing is not allowable. However, under your program, you're able to pay the landlord of that person. So that's how that is usually ineligible, but the workaround is that you can pay the landlord or the utility company. And then for new applicants or activities, or just in general, if you have any questions, first time applicants, please go ahead and either call or email. I have contact information later on in the presentation at the end, but call us and email us just kind of if you have any questions about what you might want to submit. We love being able to help support you during the application process. So please contact us and we can work with you to let you know upfront what may be eligible and what may not be. For previously funded, if it's a new activity, same thing. We just want to make sure that we can support you in the application process rather than having to shift things maybe at the end of it. An application, as far as the overview, I'm sorry, I scrolled, let me go back. There are 3 separate applications. When you receive this, if you haven't already looked online to pull up the application is approximately 20 pages long. And within that master application, there are 3 subcategories, so 3 sub applications. So you have, and we'll get into the details with that later on, but it's important to note that there are 3 separate applications for public services, public facilities, and housing. And then if you're applying for multiple activities, a separate application will need to be submitted for each request activity. So if you have one that's under the public services, and then you also have a housing activity, you would need to have those 2 separate applications. Please, when you are submitting your application, please only submit the completed application. As I mentioned, there are probably going to be some portions that don't apply to you. If you're only applying to public services, there's no need to also include the blank pages for public facilities and for housing. It's more copying for you guys. It's more for us to just eventually set to the side. So go ahead and leave those out. Truly only submit whatever is the completed application for your agency. Very important, funds are only to be used for people residing within city limits. And that is something that, especially for housing types of projects, et cetera, we do verify their addresses to make sure that they are within city boundaries. So it's important to know that that is an expectation. And so there are some exceptions to that. For example, if it's a shelter type of situation and the shelter is located within the city limits, then those that are receiving services at the shelter are presumed to be city residents. So even if they maybe are from Seguin or something originally, as long as they're here and they're receiving care from you and your location is in the city, then they are considered to be residents at that time. Additionally, for the applications, if you are submitting for salary costs, we do ask that you submit a job description. As I mentioned, there's some where it's going to be very clear and obvious that, it's a client intake. We just kind of need to see what it is that they are performing. There are some kind of behind the scenes HUD restrictions when it comes to things like if it was someone that was providing spiritual counseling or something like that, even though it is a counseling service, that may be a restriction by HUD. So that's why it's good for us to be able to see the salary costs. For audit purposes, we do need for you to go ahead and submit your most recent management letter. And Paula, if you want to jump in there, I just kind of had that as one of your notes, but I think that the audit details you'll see both in the application, but if there was anything specific, Paula, you're more than welcome to jump in. Otherwise, we're good. Okay. And then any information that you provide, please make sure that it's itemized, that it's as complete as possible. The program, it's February now. There's a lot going on. Application will be due in March, and then the contracts are going to start in October. So we understand that there are going to be some moving parts, but we do need for it to be as accurate as possible based on your historical, your projected knowledge, things like that. So itemize an accurate budget, realistic timeline and schedule. As much as we would love to construct a new community center in 30 days, not always feasible. So please make sure that it's realistic. And then also a proportional number of beneficiaries to your funding request. So We have, as part of our measures, it's a two-part. We look to see how well you've kind of forecast with this amount of money, I'm able to support this amount of people. If it's a new program, sometimes that's really hard to tell, and we completely understand that that's something that comes up sometimes, but we do ask that you try to be as close to that as possible, because it is a measure that we report to HUD, and so we want to make sure everyone looks good. As far as, I'll talk about this a little bit more in just a moment, but we are going to have electronic and hard copy options. Usually it's only hard copy, but we understand that with everything being as sensitive as it is right now, we will also allow electronic submissions. So if you are doing a hard copy submission, which can be mailed or dropped off in person at City Hall, it needs to be one complete original application that's going to have all your signed certifications and the requested attachments, like I mentioned, the audit, things like that. If you're submitting hard copies, we do also ask that you provide 10, I've called them abridged copies, and that's really only going to be, it's going to be just the nitty gritty portion of your application. So it's essentially going to be sections 1 and 2. Don't worry about doing the certifications or the attachments again, because those are just for our files. Those abridged copies are provided to our committee for their review. So it's not necessary for them, for you to provide 10 additional full copies. So just one full copy, please. And then incomplete applications may result in disqualification, but we do really try to work with you if there's a missing signature or something along those lines. But it's just something to be aware of as far as that goes. A little more detail about the applications. As I mentioned, there are going to be different sections within each of them. So section 1 has just an overview of your agency, the funding request, the activity, and the associated beneficiaries. And then section 1 is going to be broad. So all of your applications, whether it be for public services, etc., will always have that same section 1. You get into more specific information when you get down to sections 2A, B, and C. And so I just tried to kind of define it a little bit more to make it a little bit, hopefully a little bit more obvious, that section 2A is going to be the application for public services. That is going to include your budget information. And then section 2B is the application for public facilities. And then section 2C is going to be your application for housing. Again, public facilities and housing can be a little bit confusing sometimes because, if you're working at apartment buildings or something like that, and you would think that that would be a housing type of situation, you may, apply under the housing, but really it should have been public facilities. We do try to work with you, but just to be mindful, public facility is open to the public, and housing is for a homeowner, a specific homeowner. Section 3 is going to have your certifications. Those are certifications that are required by HUD. That's, drug-free workplace, etc. Please review all of them, sign all of them. And then I did just want to make note that those are only required with the submission of your full application. Don't worry about submitting that information. If you're doing hard copies, don't worry about also submitting that information with the abridged hard copies, the 10 copies. And then the attachments such as the audit, etc., same thing. Just go ahead and put those full documents within the one complete application. Don't worry about including those within the abridged hard copies. As I mentioned, for the applications, we are accepting hard copy and electronic applications, regardless of what type you are submitting. They are due on March 10th at 4 p.m. local time. On the off chance you happen to have a headquarters somewhere else who's maybe going to be submitting on your behalf, just please know that it is 4 p.m. local time. And then because applications submitted after the deadline won't be accepted or reviewed, unfortunately, and that would be a shame. If you do choose to go with the hard copy route, as I mentioned, one complete original application that has all the certifications and attachments with it. We also need to see an electronic copy of the complete application all the certifications and all of that on a USB, just some kind of device that we can go ahead and get saved into our system. And then with a hard copy, we also request those 10 abridged applications. Those are sections 1 and 2. If there's anything else that you happen to notice, but I think typically it's just sections 1 and 2 that we provide to the to CDAC. And so if you could do your 1 full application, your electronic version of that application, and the 10 copies, those please don't tab them or staple them because we do a lot of shuffling and it just takes a lot of time. So paper clips are fantastic if you have them. And that would be for the complete application and also for the copies. Hard copies must be delivered in sealed application packet to City Secretary's office at the New Braunfels City Hall. The application has more information as far as the address and all of that. They can be hand delivered or mailed. And then for the electronic version, you can submit 1 complete original application with all of the attachments and certifications to us via email. We do know that there are some agencies that maybe have some size restrictions on their emails. So if it's something along the lines where you need to load it into Google Documents or something along those lines, please send us that link well before the application deadline so that we can get in there and just make sure that we can access the application, just at least make sure that it's there. But ideally, if possible, please submit the entire application by email to myself and to Paula. As soon as we receive it, we'll turn around and we'll send a response during standard business hours. We'll send a response that we've received it. And so once we've received the applications, the initial step is that Paula and I are going to go through and we're going to review them for both completeness and to make sure that what you've requested is eligible according to HUD, because as much as we love somebody and something that you're going to suggest, unfortunately, HUD has their standards and we have to make sure that we meet those standards. So within your application, after, just during our review, it helps to make sure that your narrative contains a well-defined description of what it is that you're requesting, that there are clear and relevant outcomes and measurements, as I mentioned. So, as much as we would love to serve the entire city with $5,000, it's not feasible, more than likely. So, if that's 100 people, that's 100 people that are receiving service that weren't before. So, but those are measures that we need to make sure are included within there. And then if you were not previously funded by CDBG, make sure that it's not, the activity isn't duplicating a service. And then if you were previously funded by CDBG, as I mentioned, public services, you do need to show an increased demand and level of service, or if it's a new one. So maybe you've received CDBG, for housing activity before, and now you're going to be, serving them food at their houses or something along those lines, delivering those, then you would just have to show that that was a new activity for your agency. And please make sure that the project or activity is ready to go as possible, because we have a year in order to be able to meet our expectations that are set, that are sent to HUD and approved by HUD. So if it's something where you're going to have a meal program, then please make sure that your chef is lined up, for example. That you already have those behind the scenes, and really it should just be our funding that's going to hopefully get you across that finish line. So please make sure that things are ready to roll and that they're timely and realistic. Doesn't have to be October 1, but let us know if it's October 1 and then done in, sorry, I just got an email from Tony. So just to make sure that if it's April, that's okay. Just let us know that it will be done in May, for example. And then please make sure that your organization or staff has strong experience and the capacity to manage the activity. We all know that it's tough to be staffed. And so when you're trying to roll out a program, just make sure you have that support to really help out your clients, you know. And then that the proposed activity budget leverages funds other than the CDBG funding. HUD likes to know that they are adding to the bucket. They don't like being the only source of funding. So that is a question that's available on the application. It's just mentioning what other funding is out there, be that private, be that other federal funding, state, local, whatever. They just want to know that they're not the only players in the game, so to speak. And then again, just making sure that your beneficiaries are proportional to the funding request. I'll mention it later, but when we go through the ranking, there could be, just as a heads up, there could be an adjustment, you know, as much as we would love to fully fund everybody, especially in the public services, it's not something that's possible very often. And so there's usually a conversation after the fact that, okay, with this dollar amount, how many beneficiaries will you now be able to serve? So please don't think that, you know, if you're awarded half of your amount, you're going to be expected to serve the same amount of people. We would expect there to be an adjustment, and that is a conversation that we have after the fact. As I mentioned, so after we've gone through and we've done our initial screening process, anything that's eligible, once we know that we are good to go, then Paula and I provide those applications to our Community Development Advisory Committee, CDAC. I've mentioned them a couple times. They are truly an advisory committee that their role is to review and to rank applications and make funding recommendations that are then provided to council for consideration. So Paula and I assist them, but for the most part, they are, you know, 9 citizens that are wide variety of background, and you know, they are a huge help, especially in those public services aspect, when it comes down to really drilling into the applications and determining how to best support the city's residents with grant awards. During their review, additional information may be required. So, you know, we will have potentially all reached out to Paul, and I may have reached out to you already, but they may have additional questions as they kind of dig into things. So what we've typically done is there would be a separate meeting maybe afterwards, and there will be, but we may also reach out over email just to make sure that we are able to get the information to them as quickly as possible. So I'll talk about that in the timeline a little bit, but just know that we may contact you by email if we're just kind of needing some clarifications, or if there's some kind of supplemental documentation that we need. Maybe a description on your program, things like that, a brochure or something. Post award. So this would be after it has gone to council and we are rolling into the year. We feel like it's really kind of helpful for y'all to know what kind of reporting may be required. And so typically what we do is that after the contract has been awarded and it's executed and we are actively into our program year, we do have monthly reports. Those are just progress reports. And it's just literally one page where we are just asking 3 questions about how things are going. You know, what are some challenges, etc. And so it's just 3 questions, but we do ask for those by the 10th of every month. We just want to keep touch, make sure if you guys are experiencing any issues, we're able to support you. And then there are also reimbursement. Sorry, I get into that on the next slide. So briefly mention, it's a reimbursement program. So essentially, y'all will pay for the cost of the services that are provided, et cetera. And then you submit, you know, based on your awarded contract, you submit a request to the city for reimbursement. And, but that's not required for you to submit every month. So if you're not going to really be getting things kicked off and needing reimbursement until a little bit later in the year, then the only reports that are necessary are those monthly status reports. And then you're welcome to then start incorporating those reimbursement. It is important to be mindful of that. HUD gets a little nervous when those aren't submitted, you know, in what they consider to be a timely fashion. So please keep us in the loop if you are experiencing any issues, because that could be something that HUD asked us about. So we just want to make sure that everything is good behind the scenes. Some of the other reports that are required, it's going to be your number served for the month, the ethnicity, and separately the race, which when we do a contract kickoff meeting, that will be described in more detail. But just know that those are two separate categories according to HUD and two separate measures according to HUD. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out to us and we can share that information with you. But that is very commonly a question that people have when it comes to the reporting. Also need to know the household income, because obviously these are low to moderate individuals. Number of people in the household, if it's a female headed household, elderly or disabled, and then if there's other information depending on the type of program that you have. So those are just the types of things for the ethnicity, the household income, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of those are even compiled within one spreadsheet. So just so that you're aware that it looks like a lot of information, but we do try to streamline it as much as possible. And we're only asking because HUD is asking. I promise you, we would not ask if HUD didn't have the question. And then as far as, so throughout the year, especially if you're a new agency, we do try to provide assistance as we go along. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. And then, but otherwise, if you have received funding before and you're pretty familiar with the program, then we monitor, it's called monitoring. We just kind of come in and review your process, et cetera. We monitor the activities at least once per year. So it may be at the closeout of it and everyone is high-fiving, it went great. Or it can be throughout the year if you are having some adjustments, just kind of needing some extra support. We're here to help you and to support you. So just please know that if we're asking questions, it's only because HUD will ask the questions also. And then as far as the expenditures, so as I mentioned, this is a reimbursement program. And so you will have your costs, you'll submit to the city for reimbursement, and then actually we pay you, and then we as the city ask for reimbursement from HUD. So the check that you receive will be from the city, it won't be from HUD. The contract period is going to be October 1st. Typically it will be October 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2022. There's an exception, which I'll talk about in the timeline, but for the most part, that's our time frame. Reimbursements, as I mentioned, have got to be submitted in a timely manner, or at least make us aware. Because if unfortunately, it's just not happening this year, just to certain struggles, it's something that the contract could be canceled. We really don't like to cancel contracts, and that's why we're here to support you as much as possible. But we just need to be aware. If there are any unexpended funds at the end of the contract period, it's going to be recaptured. Really, that just means that if you were, awarded $10,000, you were only able to use $8,000 during that time frame. That means you've been reimbursed for that $8,000, and that $2,000 that's just kind of in the bank, so to speak, behind the scenes, is just absorbed then by it rolls back into the city's program. And contract term dates will not be extended. It's really hard for us to wrap things up and close things out with HUD if we're not able to get things completed by September 30th of that year. We've had exceptions, especially this past year was weird, but typically they will not be extended. So the contract term date is September 30th, 2022. As far as an overview of the timeline, subject to change, but hopefully this is pretty solid. We will provide any updates on the city's website. I will be going and doing a big cleanup on the city's website. I'm sorry, there's a lot that's been going on. So please know that it will be updated and nice and pretty for y'all, before the end of the week for sure. But in the meantime, So any updates that we have to the schedule, if there's a meeting cancellation or something, I'll post it on there just so that you're aware of it. So today, applications are available. Pre-application workshop, thank you for attending. And then applications are due March 10th at 4 p.m. Again, electronic or hard copy. Please note that with all of the health stuff, we are practicing the social distancing right now. And so we would not recommend, waiting until 3:59 to submit your application, because if something were to happen and the building is closed or something like that, then feel horrible about not being able to accept it. So just kind of pad your time frame maybe a little bit more than you would usually, just to be mindful of that. As I mentioned, CDAC, the question and answer session, it used to be presentations, but now it's just truly a question and answer opportunity. That will be April 1st. A lot of these meetings, we expect they may be virtual at this point. We're just saying that they're virtual until further notice. If it were to be held in person, which it will be again at some point, then that would take place here at City Hall. And so I just have location TBD, because it could be email, it could be virtual, might be in person, but not likely. Regardless, that's going to be April 21st. And then CDAC then takes the information that they've gathered during their review and during that question and answer. They rank the applications, come up with those funding recommendations on May 5th. And then as soon as they have formed those recommendations, we make sure to notify everyone. All of these meetings are available to the public, and we encourage you to attend. But if you're not able to, we do notify you by May 6th, that following day. And then there is a public hearing at the City Council meeting on June 28th. Then their City Council, if all goes well, they approve the funding recommendations July 26th. And so with administrative things back behind the scenes, that's kind of why it looks like those dates are staggered out as much as they are. And then HUD has their review, their approval, their release of funding more often than not by October 1st. The exception that I mentioned is that housing activities require another level of approval from HUD. And so that can take, depending on how smoothly things go, it can be sometimes, if we're pushing it, we can have it available, or they may have it available by the end of October, but usually it's going to be about November, early mid-November, that those are available for housing activities. So just be aware that it's not as readily available or as quickly available as the public services, for example. And then we have our contact information. And so as I mentioned, Jen Gates, I'm the grants coordinator for the city. And this is my office number. Email, we're working kind of a hybrid schedule. So it's usually easiest to reach myself by email. And then, or Paula, our consultant, that's her cell phone number, and she's available all the time. Thank you, Paula. And that's her email address also. So, all right. And as I mentioned, we are going to have this, the presentation will be available online. We are recording this. So this session will actually be available online also. And then the application, etc. So we just make sure that that should be available probably, by close of business today. Those will be posted online, CDBG website. And so at this point, I think we can go ahead and open it up for questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my presentation screen, but I will have it available just in case you guys have any specific questions. I can pop it back up there. So there we are, PY21. So are there any questions at this point? Tony, I believe, mentioned that there is the raised hand. If you kind of hover towards the bottom of the screen, there's a raised hand function. And so you can just click on that and let us know if you have any questions. I, again, just would request that it would be something specific either to the program or to the application process. Anything that's about, any activity that you may specifically want to do, if you could just please, contact us separately, and we would appreciate that. So, Tony, I'm not seeing any raised hands, but do you see any?
I do not see any.
Okay. That means it's all good, right, guys? Hopefully, Tony, can you unmute everyone so that they can just say yes, Jen?
And if I'm not out of line, I would say this, and I sent you an email about electronic submissions, and just for anybody that's out there, if you all have some kind of issue with your email limits, or if you don't have flash drives available or whatever, just let Jen know, and we can help her set up a different electronic submission option. I mean, we certainly do not want, right, you guys are all running, nonprofits or, things like that. We don't want technology to be a hindrance to you getting the information submitted on time. So we can absolutely help you all with that.
Well, thank you very much for that, Tony. I thank you on their behalf, because I obviously don't have IT in my title. So Tony, y'all get a hold of me, and then I will reach out to Tony, and we'll make sure that we can support y'all. So, okay, I think that if we don't have any questions at this point, we had about 19 people, it looked like, that were able to directly tune in. And so please contact Paula and I. We are available as much as possible. We, again, want to support you through the application process however we can. And thank you so much for attending today and dealing with my IT stuff. Thanks, Tony. So it'll be better next year. We're just adjusting. It'll be better. All right. If we're good, then I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Tony, if you go ahead and stop the recording, and I'll get this posted.
I'll do it, and I'll send you the recording after lunch.
Okay. Thanks, Tony.
You bet. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Paula.
Bye.